Hello, we've just entered 2025, and from all of us at Hammer Missions, we would love to wish you a very happy new year. One of the things that we're really excited about in 2025 is actually the increased use of drones in built up areas like cities. Cities like New York or London, which used to be very difficult for drone flights and any kind of drone work, have now become open to actually use drones on multiple projects, and therefore we're very excited about the increased use of drones in these cities. And so in this video, we're going to cover some of the important things that you need to keep in mind if you're looking to take up some of these drone projects in these cities. Let's have a look. Hey everyone, I'm Varun from Hammer Missions, and if you have been watching our channel, you might notice that we actually cover many different topics surrounding the use of drones. And in this particular video, we want to cover the top 10 things that you might need to keep in mind if you're looking to get onto some of the drone projects that are happening in built-up cities like London or New York. Let's have a look. So the first thing you've got to keep in mind if you're looking to take on some of these projects with, it might be capturing a skyscraper for deficiencies, or it might be understanding what's going on with a roof in a particular building. Essentially, the first thing you need to take care of is essentially the airspace. So this goes without saying, if you are flying in highly regulated airspace, things like London or New York, you've got to make sure that the site you're looking to operate in is actually doable. And what I mean by that is you should be able to check what is the different airspace regulations in the area of the flight, on the time of day, and what sort of additional authorizations you might need. For instance, for New York, most of the places you're looking to fly, you typically need a flight permit from NYPD anywhere between 30 days in advance to higher. So please make sure that you've got the appropriate flight authorizations and permits in place, and a lot of that has to do with airspace. These cities tend to have a lot of airports, and therefore you want to make sure that you're not flying anywhere near an airport, or if you are, you have the right sort of permissions in place. So that's probably the number one thing to take care of. Number two, takeoff locations. So once you've got your airspace and you start planning your flight, one of the things you need to be mindful of is, do you actually have locations where you can take off? Now, you might want to take off from the roof of a building if you're doing a particular type of roof inspection, or you might want to take off from the ground if you're doing facade inspections, or if you're doing the entire building envelope, you might be able to find a happy medium between the two, or one of the two might work. But regardless of that, you need to figure out, do you actually have the appropriate takeoff locations? And in some places, you need to be able to identify whether you'll be able to access that takeoff location. So that's number two. And these takeoff locations are not just takeoff locations, they're also landing locations sometimes. So you also need to be able to identify whether you're able to land safely in some of those identified spots. So that's number two. Number three, time of day. So these are built up areas, cities with millions of people flocking the city every day. So one of the things you've got to be careful of is whether you're flying in a highly popular time of day, or if you're flying relatively early in the day. So being able to identify a time when you can do your flights, typically earlier in the day, or later in the day when you don't have the madness of a city, is a better way to go. Now, obviously, it depends on what kind of job you're looking to do. If you're looking to do, let's say, a roof thermal and visual inspection, maybe you're also forced by where the sun is at that point in day that governs your time of flight. So regardless of that, you need to make sure that you are flying at the time of day when you have less interruption from other people and less risk to the public overall. So that's something to keep in mind. The next one is wind. So wind, of course, is something you have to bear in mind in all flights, but when it comes to cities and built up areas and buildings, wind plays an additional role where you might have gusts between lots of these tall buildings, and so you need to make sure that you've got a good handle on what kind of wind and gusts you might experience during your drone flight. One of the things you could actually do is to invest in a wind gauge to be able to understand what is the actual wind on the day. And you need to be mindful of the fact that actually the wind speed at ground will not be the same as wind speed at the different altitudes. So one of the things we recommend is to have a threshold beyond which you just do not operate. So this could be any threshold that you choose depending on the drone you're using. For example, just for sake of example, you could decide that we will not operate if the winds are anywhere higher than 6 meters per second. This is an example. You might choose your threshold for your own specific safety conditions, but wind is also something you need to make sure you get right, and you need to be confident that that wind is also the same wind you would have your drone experience when you're flying slightly higher in between buildings, so that your flight is safe overall, no matter the altitude you're operating in. Right, next one is drone sensors. So we all know that drones are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and they've got all sorts of different instruments on board, which make the flight extremely stable. And so, since you're operating in a slightly higher risk area with built-up structures, you want to minimize the chances of a sensor failing. And therefore, what's really recommended, whether it's the vision sensors, whether it's the compass, whether it's the accelerometer, whether it's the IMU, you need to make sure that you've got all of your different sensors on the drone calibrated well in advance of the flight, and there is no chance of a sensor failing because of poor calibration, because you've already done that in advance. So that's a good practice to build. The next big one, and this is probably the biggest one, is GPS signal. So one of the things you will experience if you're flying in a built-up area like New York is the inability for the drone to get GPS signal at lower altitudes, and that's because buildings unfortunately block GPS signal. So what can you do about it? Well, first thing is you need to be aware of the fact that your flight could lead to the loss of GPS signal for the drone, and therefore you need to be ready at all times to be able to take manual control and fly the drone safely to home. If you have GPS, you can essentially do an automated mission and you can actually fly in a more stable flight, but you need to ensure that you acquire GPS before you start your flight. And to be able to do that, what you can do is you can take the drone and fly to the top of the building first, where the drone is exposed to the sky, and with a clear view of the sky and less buildings blocking GPS signal, you're able to get GPS. And then once you're able to acquire many GPS satellites, you can then resume your flights, but then still keeping that mindful eye on whether the GPS number of satellites is looking healthy at all times in the flight. So that's really important. The next one is compass calibration. So one of the things you want to make sure is that the entire flight you are oriented correctly, and to ensure that is to essentially have compass calibration done in advance. Now, you want to make sure that if you're looking at your drone app during flights, that the reported angle of the drone is what the drone's actually looking at. And so sometimes, because the drone is going to be so far away from you, you wouldn't be able to figure out how you're oriented. And to ensure that your orientation is correct at all times, really important to invest in the right compass calibration. Right. The next on the list is proper flight planning. So I cannot stress this enough. Flight planning is essentially the key to ensure that you have a safe and successful flight, where you're not just ensuring that your drone is safe at all times, but you're also ensuring that you have all the right data captured appropriately for the type of mission you're looking to execute. So for instance, if you're looking to do a facade inspection, it's really important for you to be able to pre-plan where the drone is going to fly, what photos is it going to take, and how much time is it going to take you to take those photos. Do you have enough batteries? What happens in the case of a battery swap when the battery is running out of battery, and you need to be able to quickly mobilize a new battery and put the drone into the air. So flight planning and thinking through all the different conditions and contingency measures is really important, and having a flight plan that you can actually have on file and communicate to other stakeholders is really important in ensuring that you have a safe and successful mission with respect to capturing the best data possible. So flight planning, really important. The next thing is to essentially look at investing in 3D flight planning or 3D building flight planning tools. So obviously, this is something that we have a vested interest in, because we at Hammer Missions are producing 3D flight planning tools, where we think that actually in 2025, we don't think the drone flights and the drone displays should be 2D anymore, especially when we're doing buildings. We need to go 3D. And so at Hammer Missions, what we're investing in is to provide technical tools that allow you to create your flight plans in 3D and see them in 3D along with the drone, so that you're able to take the images and all of the data in the right place and build a 3D understanding of where the drone is with respect to the real world, and not just a 2D understanding. Because let's face it, The more 3D information that we can get, and since we live in a 3D world, the better decisions we're able to make on the fly, and the better data we're able to get in a safe and secure manner. So try to invest in technical tools. Doesn't have to be our missions, could be other tools, but tools that actually help you create the better flight plan, tools that help you create the better intelligence, situational awareness as you're flying. This could be anything from cordoning off the area you're going to take off from, all the way to investing in walkie-talkies to be able to communicate with other pilots on site on the day. And last but not the least, we've got flight policies. So one of the things that you need to ensure you invest in is contingency measures for every single scenario. So if you're flying in this built-up environment, chances are you will have a GPS failure, you might have a remote connection failure to the drone, you might have a prop that goes off, you might have all sorts of different scenarios. And I don't want to scare you by talking through all these different scenarios, but I want to prepare you, because ultimately one of these things can happen and you cannot eliminate every risk 100%. But what you can do is you can plan for every single risk. So whether it's losing GPS signal or whether it's not having a communication to the drone anymore, you can prepare all of these different flight policies where, let's say, you just arm the drone to come home automatically if it loses signal. Or you essentially have a policy that if you are experiencing low battery and you need to return home quickly, you're able to quickly identify what your takeoff and landing location is going to be, and you're able to communicate that to other pilots on the site. So essentially having a table of all the different flight policies and what to do in what situation can be really, really helpful when you are architecting your flight in a built-up area like New York. So I went through that pretty quickly, but that was a list of maybe the top 10 things you need to think about when you are flying in built-up cities. And one of the things you have to always think about is that nothing really beats experience. So we would urge you in 2025, take on that challenge to do some of these missions in built-up areas and pave the future for aerial work using drones. And if you need any help, we are right here to help you with any questions with respect to capturing data. Could be roof inspections, facade inspections, building envelopes, anything, you name it. We're here to help you at Hammer Missions. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next video for Knowledge Hub.